He succeeded in achieving these and much more. Richard oversaw the building and expansion of the university museums, brought more than 400 exhibitions to campus, curating many of them, and diligently worked to bring thousands of artworks and objects into the permanent collection. He has had an extended career serving the arts in the museum field, including 19 years at the Brooklyn Museum and teaching for 10 years at New York's Parsons School of Design, prior to coming to Richard beat me to campus by a year and is beating me to retirement by a half year. He has this competitive edge that Of course, back then, one of us had a darker beard and a little more hair. I'll let you figure out which one that was. He was one of the first persons I met from outside my department, and since that time, he's been a wonderful colleague and friend. I'm not sure we became friends because of some common interests or concerns, or because we just couldn't avoid one another in the cozy space that was Booker Hall before the Modlin Center blossomed on our campus. Richard was and is willing to share both his knowledge and love of art with anyone willing to listen. He listened attentively to the madcap ideas of faculty members from across the campus. He programmed music events and film events to coincide with exhibitions in the gallery space. He housed a modern Soviet art exhibit curated by Dr. Joe Promkowski that called for members of my own department to design and construct a Russian apartment inside the gallery. Under his leadership, the museums hosted a variety of dance and theater performances as well. Hopefully, he has forgiven me for suggesting we take a group of students to London for 3 weeks to see 24 plays in 18 museums. Oh yes, we visited Stratford-upon-Avon during that 3-week period as well. We witnessed exceptional exhibits in galleries and museums throughout that arts-rich city. And although we returned physically exhausted, we also returned spiritually rejuvenated. Indeed, we fired the imaginations of students who joined us. That experience of revitalizing the spirit and challenging the intellect is what Richard has always tried to do with the university museums. He has had significant impact on patrons, students, faculty, and staff. He's continually explored ways to make art a vital part of both campus life and the community's life, whether in that tiny classroom converted to a museum in what was known as the FAB, or the wonderful galleries that we now have. Yes, I am in theater, but the arts speak to one another, and Richard's contributions to my expanding perceptions and to my work have been invaluable. And for that, I am profoundly grateful. Richard has said he wanted the museums to have an impact on the community, writ large and small. My friend, like you, they have. Tonight's program includes presentations by many people who worked with Richard, not only as a colleague, but as a student, a collaborator, and as a friend. I will introduce each speaker and then let them tell you about their relationship with Richard. First among these is Joan Dara from the Brooklyn Museum compatriot.
Good evening. And a lovely evening it is. So you all know that guy. Well, I had the privilege of meeting Richard Waller before he had a beard. Yes, it's true. In 1979, when we met at the Brooklyn Museum, Richard, the director of the museum's community gallery, and I, an annoying, new to the education department program assistant, who had been charged with producing a tableau vivant performance on the occasion of the forthcoming American Renaissance exhibition. These living pictures were to represent 8 objects on view in the exhibition and were to be performed in the museum's great court. Each tableau was to be accompanied by a musical selection contemporary to the period. I had been charged to cast the actors in these living pictures with lay people from the staff. It was a very low-budget production. When I saw Richard for the first time, he had walked through the education galleries we hadn't even met, and I was enthralled. I was so taken with that widow's peak hairline and that 1970s mustache. Before we were even properly introduced, I confronted Richard with, "I'm going to have to paint you green." Richard, who was accustomed to dealing with living artists, didn't even blink. In true Richard Waller form, agreeable to work cheap, he consented to being cast and painted green. The reason for this was one of the objects chosen to be performed was Edwin Austen Abbey's sketch for Sir Galahad, charcoal and white chalk on gray-green paper, a study for the quest of the Holy Grail murals at the Boston Public Library. Notice on the slide, on my right, yes, the monk on the left. Notice the widow's peak and the mustache. Richard performed beautifully. Personally, I feel this was Richard's hallmark professional achievement. Unfortunately, I couldn't retrieve the production photos. You know, when you reach a certain age, and you take forever to retire, all that decades-old memorabilia is buried so deep and left for your heirs to rediscover. So you will have to imagine Richard in this pose. And later, I am sure that after he's had a Negroni, he'll assume the pose for you. In fact, I know he's been practicing. This theatrical event was an interesting mid-career milestone for him, but his most important professional achievement at that time in Brooklyn was his development of the community gallery. From the late 1960s through to the 1980s, Richard's gallery grew as a major presence of contemporary art in Brooklyn. And it was the only contemporary art presence at the Brooklyn Museum at that time. To say that the Brooklyn Museum then, during this period, was a sleepy institution is an understatement. It was dead. The Dodgers had left, the breweries had closed, and the surrounding neighborhoods were crime-ridden. No one would get on the subway. And the only contemporary cultural life at the museum was Richard's community gallery. In fact, there were often days when he had an opening to one of his gallery shows of living artists. There were people in the gallery. This early directorial success was augmented by the establishment of the Brooklyn Artists Registry, which provided access for galleries, dealers, collectors, curators, and art colleagues to Brooklyn artists. This was long before anybody had ever heard of Williamsburg. When I returned to the museum in 1982 as head of the Brooklyn Museum Art School, the museum and the school were still poorly attended. I thought, what am I going to do? How are we going to give this art school a boost? And then I thought about that man I painted green, the multi-talented Mr. Waller. I was sure he could improve the art school the way he had developed the community gallery. So why not ask him to take over as faculty chair? In his new post, he took charge establishing a legitimate curriculum and overhauled the prolific student exhibition series, giving the art school a serious academic presence. Later in of his Brooklyn Museum career, he was asked to head the museum's exhibition and graphic design department, where he oversaw and often personally executed much of the graphic work, as well as directed the exhibition design, schedule, and production, all while teaching at Parsons School of Design. Richard's long tenure at the Brooklyn Museum, and again here at UR, spans over 50 years. UR was the beneficiary of our Sir Galahad's search for the Holy Grail. It was his quest, and still is, to preserve, protect, and serve not only the collection, but to educate and foster new artists and art professionals. That musical selection that I mentioned, that accompanied the Sir Galahad sketch tableau, which, by the way, was where you had to hold the pose during the whole musical presentation so that people had a chance to tell whether you were real or not. We all know how disciplined Richard is. He didn't flinch. But the musical accompaniment was an 1887 song, Comrades, by Felix Magellan. The lyrics portrayed two friends who came to each other's side in the time of need. It began with the lyric, Comrades, comrades since we were boys. And it ended with, when danger threatened, my darling old comrade was there by my side. Those of us who have worked with this superhero art professional, now all of our own Sir Galahad, and are privileged to call him friend, quickly came to love him. When Richard called and told me he had finally announced his retirement, he asked, would you please come and help me get out of here? So my darling old comrade, I'm here by your side, as well as all the others who today are standing by you in this room and those also in spirit. On that note, I am pleased that you are finally blowing this pop stand and we can get back to playing again and hopefully getting into some trouble. Thank you.
Next, I would like to introduce David Leary, former Dean of Arts and Sciences at the university and retired university professor from the University of Richmond.
I have to say, excuse my allergy-driven voice, this picture is so perfect, isn't it? I mean, had quizzical, whimsical, totally authentically Richard. It just really captures, it's really wonderful. The arts are important, photography too. I'm really pleased to be here tonight, thank you. And I'm really happy to see Rich and Martha Morrill here too. Rich, you're going to get a mention in what I have to say, and you richly deserve it. Richard Waller's retirement as Executive Director of the University Museums has put me in a reflective state of mind, eliciting memories of my own job interview for the Deanship of Arts and Sciences in March 1989. In particular, I remember the question that I asked of Rich, President of the university, at the end of my 2 days on campus, namely, where are the arts? I knew the literal answer, of course, but what I meant was, how on such a beautiful campus, with such nice facilities in general, could most of the arts, music and theater as well as art, be crammed into one building in which, for instance, the sets for plays had to be, right here, had to be disassembled and removed so that musical concerts could take place, and then hastily reassembled for the next night's theatrical performance. This is true. And how could dance, notice I didn't mention dance, how could dance be housed as it was in the athletic center, where it was offered to students as a way of fulfilling not an art requirement, but the university's physical activities requirement? And how most relevantly could the exhibition of artworks be confined to a single relatively small room, though granted, some shows were allowed to spill over into the corridor? None of this seemed worthy nor anywhere near adequate for a university that was seriously committed to liberal education and hopeful of becoming a greater resource for the larger Richmond community. When I asked this question at the end of my interview, I had no idea that Rich Morrow, who had been appointed president just the year before, had art on his radar too. Perhaps mentioning my concern to him contributed to my hiring. In any case, among the early actions of my deanship was the creation of a new position, director of the Marsh Art Gallery, that attracted Richard to the university in 1990. Even then, I wondered how we were so fortunate to attract a reasonably young hotshot. You've heard what Richard had been doing from the Brooklyn Museum of Fine Arts, who had teaching experience at New York's Parsons School of Design. Clearly, it was only because Richard sensed the possibilities and relished the challenges that lay ahead, and there were significant challenges. Right from the start, he took charge, advancing the cause of the arts and helping us develop plans for the Modeling Center for the Arts, with its significantly expanded Marsh Art Gallery. And eventually, as you know, he took over leadership of the Laura Robbins Gallery of Design from Nature and incorporated it into the programs of what came to be called the University Museums, now including the multiple galleries, archives, and study spaces associated with the newly constituted Joel and Lila Harnett Museum of Art and the Harnett Print Study Center, thus fundamentally enhancing the university and adding significantly to the art scene in Richmond, in the city of Richmond, not just here on campus. One pithy, if inadequate way of summarizing Richard's massive contribution to Richmond, the city as well as university, is to note, as Richard in fact has already done, that the domain that he oversaw for 32 years has grown from less than 1,000 square feet to more than 17,500 square feet. And that doesn't count the classrooms, art studios, and so on that the university has added since then. It's only Richard's particular domain. And of course, this qualitative measure is one thing. The space for the arts has grown, but the quality of art that Richard has brought to Richmond far exceeds, of course, in significance, the increased space for it. Many contemporary artists of distinction have been very happy to display their work in our beautiful galleries, or rather, this is an important point, they have been very happy to have Richard display their work. Now, I mean this quite sincerely. With all the class, professionalism, and good taste he consistently brings to his work. And besides the work of living artists, our galleries have frequently been graced by works created by Rembrandt, Dürer, Rodin, Rothko, and many other historic artists. Finally, I would be remiss not to mention that it wasn't always or ever easygoing. Not only did Richard have to navigate around and tactfully control resources from sometimes reluctant administrators, whether deans or provosts or presidents, he had to deal day in and day out with faculty colleagues who were as passionate about the arts as he was, and sometimes certain that they knew better than he what was best for the visual arts at Richmond, not just in their classrooms, but in the galleries. Richard may be renowned for his calm and gentle spirit, but don't let that well-deserved reputation fool you. His quiet demeanor masked fierce determination and his steadfastness against considerable odds and stubborn opposition at times has yielded the kind of dividends that we all enjoy and take pride in today. For that determination and steadfastness, just as for his wonderfully civil and kind manner, I want to thank Richard, as I also thank him for accepting that offer to come to Richmond, relying more on hope than any specific assurance that we were able to deliver, that we would be able to deliver or allow him to do what he wanted, and give him what he wanted to have. We did our best, and it all turned out well. But he came, it was an act of faith, and we are all fortunate. And just look what he has wrought. It's a splendid legacy, almost unbelievable given where he and the university started 3 decades ago. So go forth now, Richard, with our esteem and gratitude, and enjoy the next phase of your life, as I hope you've enjoyed the last 32 years. Thank you very much.
Do I really need the exercise, Heather? Next, I would like to introduce Christopher Oliver, who is the Bev Perdue Jennings Associate Curator of American Art at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts.
Thank you, Walter. Thank you all. Before I discuss Richard come back and turn around and see a concert hall full of people who have benefited and loved their relationship with Richard Waller over these many years. It is a real privilege to be able to say that I'm part of this community of those gathered tonight. So once I can actually see you from behind the lights, I'll look forward to hearing your own stories. But secondly, I also need to point out that I was one of those students traveling with Walter and Richard in London during that rapid fire it was 3 weeks? Wow, we were ambitious. Through London, through all of those galleries, through all of those museums, and it is a vacation I couldn't plan again for myself. It was such a treat, so eye-opening, and a real pleasure to travel with you both. The last time I was in London, I was the only art historian on that trip, so a lot of that was completely new to me, but I made it a point to go back by myself to the National Theater to see whatever they had on, because I remember seeing Cyrano de Bergerac and seeing an early performance of the History Boys there. So I went and I did see Three Penny Opera by myself. Those legacies stay with us. You each, Richard, you've lit the fire, as Walter has said, and those of us in this community, I hope, will continue to pay that forward to the generations that follow us. So I first met Richard probably in the spring of 2003. I had been encouraged by a great professor here at the University of Richmond, Margaret Denton, to apply to be the Harnett Fellow that year. That's to be a student who had the opportunity and luxury to be paid for 3 months to sit amongst works of art and work on an exhibition. And it was a truly revelatory exhibition. The exhibition was called Looking at Prints, in which I, an art historian, was paired with a studio artist, a printmaker, Anne Ruman, who would create prints in different techniques, intaglio, screen print, what else do we think about it? But we would make these different varieties of prints, and I would pull examples from the permanent collection to show on a website how, through basic rudimentary methods, these prints were made. And we had this great design website that I wish was still with us today. But what I take away from that was 3 months spent learning something deeply, intimately, and really concentrating on the object. That as art historians, we have a fidelity to kind of understanding and reporting on the true nature of an object. If I don't know how a screen print is really made, am I truly able to understand its impact? Some people would certainly say yes. But I think I'm really interested in the materiality of it, and that is something that I really do carry forward today as an art curator. It's something that when I have the opportunity to interact with a student, emphasize. So all I want to say is that, Richard, this has been a really important 20 years of my life that has passed, in which I've gone from a student to a professional, but it's through the faith that you showed in the young student and the ability and time, the time to work with a student, that I am so very, very thankful for your generosity. And I do hope in the next 5, 10, 15, 20 years that I can take Richard Waller's sense of generosity, scholarship, and creativity, and hopefully some more students can benefit from that. So with that, I'll just say thank you very much, Richard.
Next, I would like to introduce Jeff Hall, the Visual and Performing Arts Department Chair at the Maggie L. Walker Governor's School.
Good evening. Thank you very much, Walter. Way back in 1990, I remember the first time I assisted in installing an exhibition in the Marsh Art Gallery with Richard. The unique hands-on opportunity was unlike anything I had ever experienced. I had come to the university as a physics major and had just switched to being a studio art major. I had had no experience except for one class in high school, and I did not understand the art world at all. The thought, care, and skill and professionalism that Richard demonstrated in organizing and installing that exhibition was and still is really inspiring to me. My own students now at Maggie Walker are trained using many of the same techniques that he did, just with a much smaller budget, to install their own work in their shows and their senior exhibitions as the skills that I learned while working at University of Richmond Gallery. Equally inspiring was my color and design class that I took with Richard. This was the one and only actual class that I took with Richard, but it opened my eyes to the deep beauty and complexity of color. It was like a veil had been lifted. That class was so powerful that I still, today, teach Joseph Albers, Interaction of Color, to my junior level classes. Each year, it's so wonderful to watch their minds be blown when I show them simultaneous contrast and see them have such a deeper understanding of color. Later in my senior year, 1994, when a group of students came to Richard with the new idea, of having a senior art exhibition at the gallery, which hadn't been done before this time, you were encouraging and supportive. That first show, which I think, that first show set me on the path to continue my artistic practice, which I continue today as a painter. So thank you for that. Even after graduating, you still took the time to meet with me as an alumni and discuss my work. You may not remember this, but at the time I was still making these found object sculptures, kind of combine paintings like Rauschenberg. Richard made the suggestion that I could paint pretty well, so maybe instead of putting these objects together, I should just paint the objects instead. At the time, I couldn't see it, but many years later, this is very much the artistic course that I'm on. For my 25th class reunion, again, you were open to having an exhibition of my paintings at the University of Richmond, which is the second painting, or the second photo. Every step of the way, you have been encouraging, supportive, and an advocate for me and my work. I have no doubt that you have equally touched the lives of many University of Richmond students. Your work in guiding the schools, museums through the transition to this wonderful new arts building, which didn't exist when I was here, creating the Print Study Center and that collection, the museum studies classes. You have left an indelible mark on the university and the students who have been lucky enough to have you. Thank you. You inspired me and changed my life for the better. I wish you a very, very happy and joyful retirement. Thank you, Richard.
It is now my pleasure to introduce W.B. Taylor, who is the James A. Bostwick Chair of English Emeritus from the University of Richmond.
I guess you're wondering why an interloper from another department is on the podium tonight. And I must say that it was an unlikely alliance from the beginning. A quirky professor of English with a passion for art collecting and a definite taste in only certain areas of art, and a distinguished and dignified, I then thought, director of a museum who actually took this quirky English professor seriously. And as a matter of fact, he turned up liked some of the same things that the professor did. And so began a number of collaborations, which for several years actually turned out fairly well. And along with these collaborations, there grew a friendship that has endured, and I trust will endure, long after the exhibitions will have been forgotten. I want to point to two particular areas of common interest that we enjoy working on together. The first was the woodcut artist J.J. Lanke's, who is known, among other things, as being the most prolific illustrator of the poetry of Robert Frost. When I think of the interest that has developed, that both Richard and I have developed and shared over the years in Lanke's and his work, I'm thinking of a line from Frost, one of his earlier poems, The Tuft of Flowers, in which he observes, "Men work together, whether they work together or apart." So it affirmed to me that people who are very different, working in separate areas, can and very often do come together with shared interests like this. And I must say that in my experience, I found it highly significant that a synergy was formed between two different people coming from two different departments in the university, working together and producing something that I think neither one of them would have thought of producing individually. And I can also say that along with the exhibitions that Richard and I worked on together, there were always some adventures involved. Sometimes a bit madcap adventures, and sometimes more sedate ones. But in the case of the Lanke's Frost connection, I want to talk about one such adventure. And there is a group of international Frost scholars who, for some 25 years, had held an annual meeting, usually in a university where Frost had taught, or where he frequently gave readings, as he did, over a period of about 40 years. And so when it was learned that we were doing an exhibition, a large retrospective of the works of J.J. Lanke's here, one of the Frost people asked me if it would be possible for the University of Richmond to be host to this annual meeting of the symposium. Well, I thought for a minute, how do we go about this? Whom do I ask? Who might be willing to take it on as the sort of official host? Well, who should step forward but Richard Waller, and produced one of the most memorable of these events that anybody has ever seen. Even today, I speak with members of the Frost community, and they remember with fondness the event as it took place here. And after the formalities of the usual session, the group discussions, the panel discussions, et cetera, the Frost members were given a preview of the Lanke's retrospective, which they liked seeing very much. The other figure that Richard and I shared as an interest was a French impressionist named Paul Maz, who spent most of his life in England, actually. And one of the things that this quirky professor seemed to have a penchant for was to be able to discover interesting caches of art, here, there, and the other place, often regarding artists that are not particularly well known in all communities. And so it was that I found myself having exposure to the a considerable amount of Paul Ma's work during the 1990s, and I started talking to Richard about it, and what resulted was a wonderful exhibition called Paul Ma's An Impressionist in England. And even today, people still talk about that one. So I'm very grateful to Richard for, number one, affirming the quirks of a dilettante and giving them some legitimacy. I'm also so grateful to him for what he taught me, in the sense that he is fixed on details in a way that very few people are. I think one of the reasons that he produces such a distinguished product is that he follows the details all the way and makes sure that everything is right before unveiling the finished product. The other thing is that this sense of detail and appreciation for it is more than balanced by his eye being on the larger perspective at the same time. It's a balancing act that very few people can pull off, and Richard does it with particular grace and aplomb. For this, I am ever admiring. And so, as Richard is looking forward to a hard-won and well-deserved retirement, perhaps I should end with just something that Paul Mas might actually have said, and that is, bonne chance, ma chère amie.
At this point in time, I ask you to watch the screen as we look at the video recordings of 3 former students, Bradley Wright Ferrarini, Laura Doyle, and Carmen Aaron.
Hi everyone, hi Richard, congratulations on your retirement. My name is Bradley, maiden name Wright, new name Ferrarini, class of 06, and I was fortunate enough to have Richard Waller as my supervisor, not 1 but 2 summers. First, as an Arts and Science Fellow working on an exhibition called Cheers, 18th Century Drinking Glasses from the Permanent Collection that somebody just donated to the museum. And creatively, with Elizabeth Schlater as well, was given this project with a new donation of glassware, with the mission to research what they are and come up with an exhibition. So needless to say, they both mentored me a lot during that process, and I had rare behind the scenes exposure to what it was like to want to be a curator, pretend to be a curator, and then actually learn from both of them, and then execute this small show at the Laura Robbins Gallery. The second summer, I was fortunate to be chosen as the Harnett Fellow, and Richard was very creative. I had 2 projects. I worked on an exhibition of Pierre Daura, which was another gift to the university from his daughter, and also created a marketing plan for the museum, which here I was as a business student, not necessarily an art history major, saying that the museum would benefit from having a survey and having more marketing and promotional materials, and I even convinced them to let me have a small event with people from my sorority, and then the other intern who was at the Performing Arts Maudlin Center, his fraternity. We had a small after-hours event for the gallery at the Maudlin Center. I remember it was actually well attended and something they had never done before, and a lot of fun. But I think when I think back to Richard, who was also my professor for museum studies, I just remember sitting in his office and having these long kind of roundabout conversations about what it's like to work in a museum. I had never really worked in a real museum. He had spent time and he knew everybody at the Brooklyn Museum. And through the Harnett Fellowship, had the opportunity to go to New York for 1 week. And I remember he emailed me. I was sitting in the library and I about fell out of my chair because he said, Bradley, we want to send you to New York and work at the Metropolitan Museum for a week. This alum named Grace Brady worked in the council's office and wanted me to come and shadow her as the Harnett Fellow. So needless to say, that opportunity sort of set me on this path. Upon graduating and moved to New York, wanting to work at the Met, thanks to Richard, his connections, and to the museums, and all of his sort of inspiring talks, encouraging words in his office made me think, maybe I can really do this. So thank you very much, and best of luck. Come see me when you're in New York. And I should say cheers. Stop it.
Hello, my name is Lori Doyle. I am a 2006 graduate of the University of Richmond. I know Richard because I worked as a docent at the University Museums throughout college, and my senior year, Richard offered me the opportunity to apply for a research grant through the American Ceramics Circle. That grant then led to the chance to go to New York and meet with curators at the Met and the Brooklyn Museum, which was just an incredible opportunity as a college student. So I just want to thank Richard for all of the opportunities that he provided and all of the guidance throughout college. And while I didn't end up pursuing a museum career, I did pursue a career in the arts. I'm now the fine art underwriting manager at an insurance company. So I really credit my Richmond experience for where I am today. So Richard, thank you, and I'm wishing you the best of luck in your next adventure.
Swan. Hi, Dr. Waller, everybody watching. I'm Carmen Hermo, and I'm the Associate Curator at the Brooklyn Museum Center for Feminist Art. But I actually started my art career at the University of Richmond, first as a gallery assistant in the museums there. I was a student in Dr. Waller's Museum Studies class, and I was also a Harnett Summer Fellow, which was a totally transformative experience that I still draw on today. I'm here with 39 of my closest friends to host the dinner party, which Dr. Waller actually worked to bring to the Brooklyn Museum. He had almost 2 decades of work here, also as a coordinator in the museum's historic community gallery, and of course, as we all know and love him, as the leader, the director of the University of Richmond Museums. When I was a Harnett Fellow, it was the first time I wrote wall labels, it was the first time I did exhibition research. It was really the groundwork for the curatorial work I do today. But when I look back and of course celebrate Dr. Waller's retirement, really what comes to mind is the relationships that make the art world possible, right? Yes, I can still draw on my checklist research, archival research skills that I honed in his course, that I worked on in museums as a student there, but I also recognize that it's actually the kind of people power, the connections, the love, the care that helps the art world function, that helps museums function. And certainly Dr. Waller's legacy is a huge testament to that. So I want to salute you, I want to wish you the happiest retirement, full of art, full of relaxation, full of joy. So congratulations, Dr. Waller, happy retirement, and sending you much love. Tom.
My favorite part about that was I didn't have to go up and down the stairs. Next, I would like to introduce Elizabeth Schlatter, the interim executive director of the University of Richmond Museums.
Speaking for the museum staff in tonight's event, and as such, I wanted to share this slide of most of the staffs who have worked at the University Museums in various capacities over the years during Richard's tenure. We're hearing these incredible accolades tonight about Richard's many contributions, and the staff have been a big part of his efforts and successes, while maintaining their sense of humor and fun amidst the professionalism and challenges. So this is a list of past and current staff. I also want to thank all the staff who work in the Modeling Center now and in the past, who have made the countless events that Richard has created and presented possible. From Baroque art history conferences to tiny piano concerts of John Cage compositions, from Balinese puppet shows to Family Day extravaganza with instrument petting zoos, to lectures and panel discussions of distinguished scholars, artists, curators, and community members. The Modeling Center has been a critical partner in the growth of the University of Richmond Museums during Richard's tenure, and we are all so grateful for their always game collaborative attitude, their technical expertise and skill, and how they make us all look so good all the time. So another shout out to Mama. So with the heavy responsibility of speaking for the staff upon me, I decided to take a somewhat different route, inspired by the print series, let's see if that works, A to Z by Matthew Carter, which is part of our permanent collection. It's from Center Street Studio Archives, which you'll hear about a little bit later. I asked each of our current staff members to contribute thoughts about Richard inspired by Letters in the Alphabet. So here we go. And if you know our staff members, and you know a little bit about the personalities, you'll notice the responses correlate to the personalities of our staff members, which is really fun. So A, B, C are all from Heather Campbell, our curator of museum programs. A is for attention to detail. From formatting labels to choosing just the right shade of paint for the title wall, Richard's attention to detail is impeccable. B is for Brooklyn Museum. As we all know, prior to his role at the University of Richmond, he worked at the Brooklyn Museum for 19 years. My comment now, Richard is not afraid of commitment, which is very impressive. And then C, Richard has cultivated many relationships in the past 32 years, relationships that, with donors, faculty, staff, students, artists, and the community. His cultivation of relationships has resulted in numerous successful partnerships and collaborations in terms of exhibitions, artwork, donations, programs, and special projects. D, E, and F are from Matthew Howell, curator of museum collections. D is for design. Richard has a keen eye for design in exhibitions and catalogs. E is for elite. Richard has a high standard for the museum collections. F is for full. Richard has successfully acquired a wide range of diverse print media, and now our collection storage is well used, which is a euphemism for full. That's true. G, H, and I, these are from David Hershey, our assistant collections manager. G is for Goya. Francisco de Goya is a seminal Spanish printmaker whose Disasters of the Worst print series is grim and graphic. Happily, the museum has acquired 30 Goya prints over Richard's time. H is for Hogarth. William Hogarth was an engraver, a satirist, and a social critic who trained his rapier wit towards a broad range of topics, as you can see in the 60 Hogarth prints that Richard acquired for our collection. And I is for Isabel Bishop, who studied at the Art Students League of New York, where she later taught. Richard has a soft spot for former Art Student League's artists. In addition to the 40 works by Isabel Bishop, the collection includes 50 prints by Kenneth Hayes Miller, 20 by Raphael Sawyer, and 33 by Reginald Marsh. J, K, and L are from Martha Wright, Assistant Curator of Academic and Public Engagement. J stands for JOMO, J-O-M-O. Richard taught me the phrase, joy of missing out, which is so wonderful because it reminds me to take a break every so often and breathe. K is for kind. While no one is truly perfect all the time, Richard has always been kind. Yes, even when I would offer a truly bizarre idea, he would smile rather than frown. And then L is for limb. Richard went out on a limb to bring me on staff when I was looking for stability in my career. For that, I will always be grateful, and am beyond delighted at how I have grown under the tutelage and support of museums. M, N, and O are from John Steele. He's our assistant preparator. M is for Manchego cheese. While not carrying the popularity of a Gouda or the perceived prestige of Brie, Manchego is loved and praised by those who are in the know. This is what I believe Richard and the University Museums have become to the University and Greater Richmond community. This is what I mean by these comments are very unique to the person who submitted these comments. So if you know them, you know. N. N is for nice beard. Never had a boss with such a nice beard. And I, for one, appreciate that. These are John. O is for ocular. I've heard Richard referred to as the eagle eye by just about everyone on staff. If a frame is hung a quarter inch low or off center, Richard will be the one to tell you about it. It's very true. But in a good way, in a good, helpful way, because it always looks better. P, Q, and R are from Stephen Duggan's, who's in Preparator. P is for professional. Richard is always professional in his demeanor. Q is for quality. Richard's shows always have been of the highest quality. R is for Richard, the man, the myth, the legend. All right, so most of these coming up next are from me. Just kind of screwed up on my after. That's okay. Although I have one additional one from Don. So this one's for me. S is for Swan Song, celebrating the permanent collection, Richard's last exhibition here. According to the dictionary, Swan Song means a person's final public performance or professional activity before retirement. It comes from the ancient Greek belief that swans sing a beautiful song just before their death, but that's horribly morbid. So instead, we might imagine Richard giving us a rendition of his favorite tune in the gallery after we finish up here tonight. And it could be the tune that John is referring to when he wrote his comment for the letter T. So John submitted a comment for T, and T stands for Total Eclipse of the Heart, which is the song John says he'll be playing on repeat once Richard retires. Which is very sweet. All right, U is for Untitled, so all the rest are me. U is for Untitled, the most important artwork title in all of art history, which enables curators such as Richard and myself to go nuts with interpretations for exhibitions on any theme, and that's a word of warning for all artists in the audience. All right, V. V is for Vino, because although Richard rarely took vacations, when he did, he always did them right, as in 2+ weeks in Italy this past summer for a design and art tour that featured wine and fresh pasta every day. We were all in awe. W is for work hours. 40 hours per week times 52 weeks a year times 32 years is 66,560 hours. Maybe vacation here and there like Italy, but no one can claim to have worked more hours for the museums than Richard, and the legacy of his output shows it. X is for xylography, which means the art of making woodcuts or wooden engravings, especially by a relatively primitive technique, and I'm very proud of myself for finding this word for the letter X. I don't know how often it's used, but it does relate directly to our collection and some of the strengths within it. All right, Y is for Yowza and years, as in Yowza. Can't believe we worked here for 32 years. I imagine it's going to take quite a while to get that academic calendar out of your system, as in like it's fall semester, it's fall break, it's winter break, it's spring semester, it's spring break, and summer. But on the other hand, Z is for zigzag, meaning lots of zigs and zags were taken to get you to this point in your career and life. And here's hoping for many more, including a few zigs and zags that bring you back to our museums for events and exhibitions you don't have to be responsible for anymore in the future, but will feature so many friends and with the art and people you've worked with and collected over the years. Thank you.
Now I would like to present Tanya Softich, who is the Tucker Boatwright Professor of Art and Art History at the university.
Hello. I first met Richard in Chicago at the CAA conference in year 2000 with millennial friends, when I interviewed for the teaching position here. I have applied at the advice of former dean, somewhat ambivalent about moving a little further up the I-95 to what looked like a slightly larger version of Rollins College, where I used to teach. Soon after returning from the conference in Chicago, a large package of beautifully designed and produced catalogs from the university museums arrived in the mail. Upon looking over them, especially those done in collaboration with our late colleague and mentor Steve Addis, I became more interested in the job. During the campus interview, Richard showed me some of the museum spaces and talked to me about the recent decision to build the Harnett Print Studies Center, the first print center in Virginia. It was a sign that I was waiting for. This was a chance to develop a print program alongside this significant and robustly growing print collection. Now I really wanted the job. So Richard is the one who sealed the deal for me. It's his fault. Over the years, 23 to be precise, I have seen the collection of the museums and the print center grow through significant donations, such as one from Win Kramarski's collection of works on paper, or the acquisition of Center Street Studios archives. Just so you know, legendary collectors such as Kramarski don't wake up in the morning and decide that they're going to give part of their very cherished collection, their life's work, to some college in Virginia in their museum. It was Richard who carefully, mindfully, and unflappably cultivated such relationships and grew the reputation of our museums and our university as a repository and an educational space worthy of a gift that would have been eagerly welcomed by any major national museum. Richard curated so many successful print exhibitions, and other exhibitions, but I'm a printmaker, so I'm biased. Brought so many exceptional print artists to campus and was so dedicated to the art of the print that his work got woven into our print curriculum that we teach today. Even in the middle of the pandemic, when I could not take students to the Print Studies Center due to the distancing protocols, Richard brought the Print Studies Center to our print lab. Students and I scrubbed down the big table in the print lab, and prints got wheeled in on museum installation cards on A-shaped archival cardboard displays. Students, as it always happens at the Print Studies Center, got a lesson in what prints can be, and students' own prints in turn grew more ambitious and more polished. His dedication to growing the collection with the purpose of educating students and campus community about the art of print, the history, and the contemporary practice of it is unmatched. And let us not forget, folks, that it is the print, the image printed again and again from a single matrix in order to multiply and convey text or image, is the mother of all media we are immersed in today, or perhaps lost in today. So go ahead, you can blame either Richard or me. Over all these years, Richard and I talked prints with students and visitors, and I had the privilege of standing next to him, analyzing the recent print acquisition together, or trying to detect whether that super thin line is the scratch on the plate, a stray fiber in the paper, or has been drawn to suggest a faint horizon line. Richard, I will always see you in that room, full of flat files and portfolio cases, your face lit up, your arms folded in a perfect white shirt, as if wordlessly demonstrating how to look at the print. The print should be on the high table, and unframed, no glass between you and the print. One should be standing 6 inches away from the edge of the table in order not to risk touching the print. Arms folded to avoid the temptation of touching the crest of the ink embossed into the paper. Bent and turned slightly to allow space for another viewer. Thank you for that space, Richard, and thank you for your dedication to the art of print and to our students.
And now may I present Jim Stroud, founder and director of the Center Street Studio.
First, I'd like to thank Elizabeth for that great use of Matthew Carter's portfolio. And it really is a demonstration of exactly why I'm so pleased that the Center Street Studio Archives is being housed here at the museum. And I'll get more to that later, but I can't wait to tell Matthew about your use of it. It was fantastic. Wonderful. So way back in 1998, Richard Wallach contacted me via our mutual friend Charlie Ritchie, who will be speaking later tonight. And Charlie, I've been publishing Charlie's prints at that point since 1994, and because Richard was interested in curating a small exhibition focusing on the work of a professional printmaking studio. And however, after visiting the studio and considering the vast number of projects I had published with artists in only the 14 short years I've been in business, Richard expanded the exhibition to pretty much fill what was then called the Marsh Art Gallery. And the show was titled More Than One Prints from the Prints and Portfolios from the Center Street Studio. And it was a terrific success. And at the completion of the show, Richard asked me what institution in Boston was going to acquire your archive. And while there were two institutions making some noises about it at the time, neither one of them was stepping up to the plate to make a commitment. And so Richard asked, well then, can we bring it here to Richmond? Smart guy. After a little discussion and negotiation, the rest is history. Boston's loss is Richmond's gain. The CSS archive is now part of the foundation of the contemporary print collection here at the Joel and Lila Harnett Print Studio Study Center. And it consists of several things, but most importantly, every BAT proof of every edition print ever produced at my studio. The BAT, or bonnet tiré, which translates into French as good to pull, is the final print that comes off the plate during image development, where the artist says, this is it, this is done. That proof then is marked as the BAT and signed by the artist, and it serves as both the technical and aesthetic standard against which each print in the edition is judged when the artist returns to the studio to sign them after I'm printing them. The archive also includes an example of every monotype project produced with my artists, and monotypes are unique prints that are usually done in series of related images. The archive also includes vast quantities of process proofs and materials, including copper plates, bearing witness to the struggle each artist faced in developing the image. And also a good number of records and personal correspondence between me and the artists are also included in the archive, and it helps round out the complete history of the studio. So in short, the CSS archives are a rich, extensive artistic resource for students, faculty, university community, and scholars everywhere to be studied and appreciated here at the Joel and Lila Harnett Museum of Art for years to come. It also serves as an opportunity, and this is what I'm most grateful for, it also serves as an opportunity for my life's work with artists to live and breathe in an environment where it can be studied, exhibited, and used, and not just warehoused in a dusty basement in some old library in Boston that will go unnamed. And imagine, bringing the Center Street Studio Archive here to the University of Richmond Museums is just one of many, many visions Richard has fulfilled during his long, extraordinary career here as Executive Director. And for this and so many more visions fulfilled, we are all deeply grateful for what you've achieved. Thank you.
Once again, if you look at the screen, and we will have video recordings from Dr. Joe Troncali, Professor of Russian Studies Emeritus, the former Dean of Arts and Sciences, Patrice Rankine, and Jennifer Cable, Professor of Music.
name is Joe Troncali. I was a colleague of Richard's, and we collaborated on a number of exhibitions. Dear Richard, on the occasion of your retirement, I'd like to wish you well and many more productive years as you start on this new journey. We had some good years together, and it was wonderful to work with you and Elizabeth on the exhibitions we did together, and the travels we had to Russia. Even though you never brought a camera, it was always a creative challenge that we met together cooperatively, and I will always be grateful for your willingness to take on new projects, and your professionalism, and your receptivity to ideas and visions outside of the box. You have been a good steward and a good friend. I hope you enjoy your well-deserved time.
Hi, Richard. How are you? I just wanted to say hello and how happy I am for you in this, your Swan song. I'm also really glad that we were able to overlap at the University of Richmond for a period of 5 years. I got to watch you do your work on everything from mounting exhibitions to catalog design and patron services. I've worked with a couple of museum directors now during my time as dean at 2 different institutions. And it seems to me that the best kind of college and university directors of museums are those people who are really interested in putting the mission of the university and college first and students first. And I really watched you do that over the course of 5 years. You were really conscientious in attending academic council meetings and being part of the Concept 30 strategic planning period. And you really understand the role of museums in serving students first, but then also being part of the broader community. I hate to be presentist, but topmost in mind for me was the COVID-19 exhibition, where you invited, along with the staff, you okay? You invited members of the community, students, faculty, administrators, to write a 300-word summary blurb response to a work of art. And it was just amazing during COVID to walk into the museum and be part of a community of thought and reflection on art, which is the purpose of the museum. And Son agrees, he loves looking at art. And we'll continue your legacy and things that you have thought are important. I'll fondly remember walking around the gallery with you for this particular exhibit that I was talking about, and for so many others across the course of the 5 years that we worked together. So, greetings to you, happy for you, congratulations on your career. Jordan says congratulations as well, and be well, take care.
Dear Richard, hearty congratulations on your retirement. So excited for you. Friends, my name is Jennifer Cable, and I teach in the Department of Music and have known Richard for, well, decades. As I look back on our many years together at UR, what stands out most for me were our collaborative events. For those who don't remember these performances and exhibitions, we took the theme from the gallery exhibition and planned a concert related as much as possible to that theme. I am dressed this way in homage to one of our most delightful collaborations. The theme for the exhibition was food-related still lifes. So, gosh, the concert had to be about food. So what to do? We performed Leonard Bernstein's La Bonne Cuisine, which is a series of songs written to actual recipes. So I came on stage with a chef hat, used this as my music folder, and the wonderful collaborator at the piano was Paul Hansen for that really fun concert. Richard, our collaborative events were so much fun and brought our programs together. Folks would come to the short concert, then walk across to the gallery to see the exhibition, and then everybody would enjoy a reception. Ah, magnifique. Richard, sharing every good wish for you for your next exciting chapter. May it be filled with joy, love, warmth, and fun. Congratulations.
And now may I present Charlie Ritchie, an artist with work in Swan Song exhibition and who had 2 solo shows at the University of Richmond in 1993 and in 2004.
I call it the University of Richard. And I first visited on the evening of the 19th of March in 1992. It was the opening of the National Works on Paper exhibition at the Marsh Art Gallery. And I was thrilled to be included in the show. And that's where I met Richard. Instantly likable, charming and funny, and he had an engaging way of asking questions and listening closely to the answers. After 30 years of warm friendship, I've come to believe this curiosity and attention is the reason that he's one of the most independent thinking, imaginative, and industrious people I've ever known. Richard's curiosity and attention often lead him to look for subjects and themes among the overlooked. In exhibition after exhibition, he has brought us revelations by going where other people missed. And his presentations always filled me with wonder and left me musing, how did I not know about this? And boy, I'm glad I do now. The current exhibition Swan Song sparkles with surprises from well-known and unsung artists. And thanks to Richard, these works and multitudes more are now preserved in the university's holdings. Richard tells me each work in the show has a personal story behind its acquisition. But I imagine he can tell a personal story for every work in the entire collection. That's just how deeply he's engaged with curating. And it extends into every corner of his personal life, where his domestic spaces are filled with the beautiful, amazing, arcane, and magical things he discovers through friends, or in an attic, or a shop, or walking in the woods. Richard's imaginative presentations are products of his questioning what if, and the phrase is essentially a mantra that flows through every part of his life. For example, when it was time to renovate the Fine Arts Building and galleries here at UR, Richard asked, what if we have 3 galleries rotating exhibitions instead of 1? And what if we add a Princeton Drawing Study Center to enhance the university's art collection? And what if we make our holdings more visible by displaying these works in the corridors and offices of the Fine Arts buildings around campus and loaning them to other institutions? And what if we cultivate internships for students and fellowships and programs and symposia that will raise the prestige of the university? And not only did Richard have the vision, he had the industry to make it happen. He gladly added huge workloads and responsibilities to those he was already carrying. But how could one person have accomplished so much? Seeking out works of art, courting artists, collectors, donors, researching shows, writing catalogs, composing detailed, informative mailers and calendars, teaching classes, giving tours, hosting events, and myriad more. And beyond that, looking across the decades, Richard guided the University Museum seamlessly into the age of the personal computer, the electronic collection database, the digital image, and the museum's online presence. And I can say personally that Richard really did an amazing job on 2 solo shows that I worked with him on. And one of my most amazing moments was when we stayed up all night at the printers watching all the proofs come for this catalog because we were going to travel the show. And we watched all night just to make sure it was being done right, and Richard was right there the whole time. What kind of guy does that? That was just amazing. In closing, I want to mention that I heard a member of the public stop by last week just to thank Richard. This mother of 2 sons, who are now grown men, was so grateful for the enriching effect Richard's programs had on their lives during their growing years. And I imagine that's what we are all doing here tonight, stopping by to say how much you really affected us, Richard. And we embody the thousands you taught and guided into the world, and the untold others you've illuminated on this campus and beyond. There's an old saying, leave it better than you found it. Richard, you leave it way, way, way better than you found it. Bravo.
And now I would like to introduce Jennifer Kavanaugh, Dean of Arts and Sciences at the University.
I know that I'm all that stands between you and going to see a wonderful, wonderful exhibit and to have some wine and some good food. I do need, though, to take this moment to tell Richard that even though you and I have only known each other for a few scant months, I feel like after our very first conversation when I arrived on campus, I feel like we had known each other forever. You have inspired me, and I am hoping that even though you are retiring, that we will still see each other many, many times and enjoy each other's company. I'm going to just end the tributes with a poem. This is by Ella Wheeler Wilcox. She was a late 19th century, early 20th century poet. You may know her best for her work Solitude, which has the line, "Laugh and the world laughs with you, weep and you weep alone." But this poem is one of my favorites, and it's called Art and Heart. Though critics may bow to art, and I am its own true lover, it is not art, but heart, which wins the wide world over. Though smooth be the heartless prayer, no ear in heaven will mind it, and the finest phrase falls dead if there is no feeling behind it. Though perfect the player's touch, little if any he sways us, unless we feel his heart throb through the music he plays us. Though the poet may spend his life in skillfully rounding a measure, unless he writes from a full, warm heart, he gives us little pleasure. So it is not the speech which tells, but the impulse which goes with the saying. And it is not the words of the prayer, but the yearning back of the praying. It is not the artist's skill which into our soul comes stealing, with a joy that is almost pain, but it is the artist's feeling. And it's not the poet's song, though sweeter than sweet bells chiming, which thrills us through and through, but the heart which beats under the rhyming. And therefore I say again, though I am art's own true lover, that it is not art, but heart, which wins the wide world over. Richard, you have given us art, but more than that, you have given us so much heart. With all my love and with the gratitude of your community, I wish you the happiest retirement and bon voyage.
I would like to thank you, Dean Kavanaugh, and to thank all of those who gave tributes this evening. Thank you for joining us during this celebration. And now, if you would please join us in the Hartnett Museum of Art for a reception and to view Swan Song, Richard's final exhibition. Thank you very much for a wonderful evening.
Thank you so very much, and we appreciate everything this evening. I know that now I'm the one that's holding you off from getting into Swan Song and the Necromy, so please stay with us for the reception, and I look forward to talking to each of you